Good to see you. How's brunch? Tastes good? Yeah, it's nice. Good. I love that song we were just singing, Come Thou Fount. How many of you are like me, you grew up in church singing that song? Anybody? Yeah, I love that. And has that line in it, here I raise mine Ebenezer. And I remember as a kid singing that song 1,000 times. I had no idea who Ebenezer was, what that was about. There was actually a guy at our church named Ebenezer, and I thought it was somehow related to him. We were going to pick him up. He was going to crowd surf. He always looked kind of nervous when we sang that. But it's just such a powerful song right out of the 18th century, just to declare that. Sometimes we sing songs here that are really, really new. Sometimes we sing songs here that are really, really old because we're connected to a 2,000-year-old history of the people of God, singing the songs of God, declaring the goodness of God, the power of God in our lives. And it's a beautiful thing. And so, come thou fount, here I raise mine Ebenezer. If you have a Bible this morning or afternoon or wherever we are in the day, you can turn with me to 1 Samuel chapter 4. I want to tell you a story today. It's a story about glory. It's a story that centers around glory. Glory is one of those words that we use it a lot in church. We talk about glory a lot, and yet, as the great theologian Dallas Willard says, sometimes familiarity can begin to bring an unfamiliarity. You use it so much, you kind of lose the power of it, the weight of it, and we all kind of know that word. It's like, well, what does God care about? Well, God cares about glory. Well, what's glory? Glory. It's just glory. It's just what it is. And so it often in our culture, the word, or in church culture especially, the word glory, it's kind of angelic, kind of ethereal, kind of Thomas Kinkadish when you talk about it. And yet in the scriptures, when the word glory is used, it often has blood on it. It often has some grit. And so I want to tell one of these glory stories today from the scriptures. 1 Samuel chapter 4. If you don't have a Bible, you can follow along on the screens, or you can download the CRB app. And that's a great place to follow along as well. I think sports culture in America especially understands the word glory better than we do in church. Yesterday, I had about 5 o'clock, my phone started ringing like crazy because my alma mater, the beloved Georgia Bulldogs, won the SEC championship. Thank you. One person. We got like 3 of us, which is, we're headed in the right direction. We need to get all these other people saved like you are, and we'll be fine. But I grew up, oh, thank you for that. That's great. That's a great line. They essentially won the SEC championship. I don't know if that means anything to you. I don't know if you're like the SEC. Isn't that the group that investigates Wall Street criminals? What is that? It's a big deal. It hadn't happened in quite some time. And all my friends were texting me, we won. And I'm thinking, what did we win? What's coming in my mailbox because we won? And it's glory. That's essentially you're with me on that. I love that. Was that an amen from the baby? Man, that's awesome. We got some holy water coming your way. It's great. You sprinkle right back. That's great. You're totally fine. My kids make way louder noises, by the way. Don't feel like you've got to get up or move or anything. I wasn't trying to. He's adorable, by the way. Sorry. Anyway. It's like the cutest kid I've ever seen. And I have 3 just like that. That's so cute. Sorry. 11:30, anything happens. So essentially, what you play for in sports, you don't get, sometimes there's a trophy, but you don't get it when your team wins. You just get glory. That's essentially what it is. When I was a kid, I had a t-shirt. It was a Nike shirt. It said on it, "We play for glory," which was awesome, man. I love that slogan. We play for glory. It's every photo I see of myself when I was a kid, I seem to be wearing that shirt. It's like my mom took every photo of me in one day. And I was really serious about dodgeball at recess, apparently, man. We play for glory. And in sports, we understand that idea of glory, but oftentimes we kind of miss that when we're talking about it in church. And so I want to tell you a story. This particular story centers around something called the Ark of the Covenant. Brought in the Ark of the Covenant from home. It's been in my bedroom for a while. How many of us have heard of the Ark of the Covenant? How many of us have heard about it only from an Indiana Jones film? That's awesome. Of course, the Indiana Jones story is told in 2 Chronicles, right between the Goliath and Fox and the Hound story. Of course, we all know the story of Jonah being swallowed by Nemo. Great story. But the Ark of the Covenant, before Indiana Jones, was something God had commanded the Israelites to build very early in their history. They leave Egyptian captivity, they begin to wander the wilderness, and God commands Moses and the Israelites to construct the Ark of the Covenant. This is not to scale, but it was a particular kind of wood that was to be used. It was sort of looked like a chess when you see images of it. And essentially, this was the glory of God contained in the camp for the Israelites. This had the presence of God. Inside of it, there were some things that marked particular moments for the Israelites. There was a pot of manna inside. God had given them manna to feed them on their wilderness journey. God had given Aaron, the brother of Moses, the staff. The staff was inside of it. The 2 stone tablets that the 10 commandments were given on were inside of the Ark of the Covenant. And to have this was the physical manifestation of the glory of God. There were specific rules that God gave to Moses about how to care for this. When it was transported from place to place in the wilderness, there were a particular set of poles that it was to be carried from place to place on. There was one tribe of the 12 tribes of Israel, the Levites. It was their job, they were the priestly tribe, to care for the Ark of the Covenant. If you had this, you had the magic, you had the mojo. This was like the flux capacitor for the Israelites. Yes, we are 2 80s movies references in case you're wondering. Thank you, Marty McFly. This essentially, this was the glory of God for the people. Now, at the particular time of this story in 1 Samuel chapter 4, Moses has been dead for quite some time, and it's a man named Eli, who's the high priest of Shiloh, who's been commanded to take care of the Ark of the Covenant. Let me hear you say, Eli. Eli is older in years, and it's his job to take care of this, but because of his age, he outsources the job to his 2 younger boys, Hophni and Phinehas. Let me hear you say Hophni and Phinehas. If you're pregnant and you're looking for a good baby name, might I offer you Hophni as an option? Now, unlike Eli is a good, upstanding man. His 2 boys, Hophni and Phinehas, they're sort of like Dumb and Dumber in the Old Testament. They cook up all these bad ideas. They often will steal sacrifices from people in the temple. They're often promiscuous in the temple. And Hophni and Phinehas are going to get Israel into a bad situation that revolves around the Ark of the Covenant, or the glory of the Lord. Now, if you've been hanging around church for a while, you know the Israelites have an enemy. Who is their enemy? The Philistines. Yeah, these are the Goliath people. They're often going to war against the Philistines, and the Philistines have better weapons. They're an iron culture. They have more money, better artillery on their side, and the Israelites keep losing. And that's where we pick up in the story. 1 Samuel chapter 4, starting in verse 1. You can follow along on the screens. Now, the Israelites went out to fight against the Philistines. The Israelites camped at where? Ebenezer. We're going to come back to that. They camped at Ebenezer, and the Philistines at Ephek. The Philistines deployed their forces to meet Israel, and as the battle spread, Israel was defeated by the Philistines, who killed about 4,000 of them on the battlefield. So it's a bloody day in Ebenezer, and it's about to get much worse. When the soldiers returned to camp, the elders of Israel asked, "Why did the Lord bring defeat on us today before the Philistines? Let us bring the ark of the Lord's covenant from Shiloh." This is where the bad idea begins. So that he may go with us and save us from the hand of our enemies. And so this is essentially Hophni and Phinehas. They cook up this scheme They're anxious. They've lost 4,000 men at Ebenezer. We should go back to Shiloh and bring the Ark of the Covenant with us, because if we have this, the very divine presence of God in battle, surely Yahweh will grant us victory. So they load it up. I would love to see the movie version of this scene. They carry it into battle against the Philistines. More people, more bloodshed for Israel. They lose against the Philistines. 1 Samuel 4 tells the story. Hophni and Phinehas are killed on the battlefield, and it says that in that particular moment, the Ark of the Covenant is stolen from Israel, and the Philistines are going to capture it. Now, Eli, the father of Hophni and Phinehas, he is back in Israel, or he's back in Shiloh, and somebody runs from the battlefield at Ebenezer all the way back to Shiloh and tells him what happens, verse 18 of 1 Samuel 4. So this guy comes up and tells Eli. When he mentioned the ark of God, it says that Eli fell backward off his chair by the side of the gates. So when he hears what happens, the ark of God has been stolen, that his two boys have been killed in battle. It says he fell backwards off his chair by the side of the gate. His neck was broken and he died, for he was an old man and he was heavy. Like, Samuel, did you really have to add that detail to the It's like he had some bone to pick with Eli, apparently. Might as well throw in, he had a bit of a weight problem. He had led Israel for 40 years. His daughter-in-law, the wife of Phinehas, was pregnant and near the time of delivery. When she heard the news that the ark of God had been captured and that her father-in-law and her husband were dead, she went into labor and gave birth, but was overcome by her labor pains, and she was dying. Or as she was dying. So if you're keeping score at home, thousands of people have died at Ebenezer. Now Eli, the high priest, has died. He's fallen out of his chair. Hophni and Phinehas have died. Now the wife of Phinehas has died as well. But before she does, it says, as she was dying, the woman attending her said to her, "Do not despair." Oh, that'll help. Thanks. "You have given birth to a son." But she did not respond or pay any attention. Before she dies, she does name the boy. She names the boy Ichabod because it has a nice ring to it. And she said, "The glory has departed from Israel." Ichabod. Because of what happened at Ebenezer on this particular day, this is a national nightmare. This is the day you do not speak of, the worst day possible. The high priest, the battle at Ebenezer, thousands of people have died. The boy comes into the world. Eli falls out of his chair. Ichabod. The name Ichabod in Hebrew, it literally just means the glory of God is gone. Ichabod. I think for some of us, if you were to tell a story of some of the worst things that have happened to you in life, or maybe you would tell a story about current circumstances at work or family, whatever it is, you could put a lot of words on it. You could write a long story or narrative of what's taken place, but at the end of the day, if I were to say, hey, in a word, sum up events, man, you would just look at me, you would say, Ichabod. It's like the glory of God has departed. It seems like God used to be with me. It seems like God used to be on my side, but now I look at circumstances, it's like Ichabod. The glory of God is just gone. It could be in terms of perhaps your marriage and 7 years ago, 24 years ago, you walked the aisle, you said, "I do." Pastor, friends, people were there. You felt like God had given you this amazing wife, God had given you this amazing husband. But here you are, 7 years in, 24 years in, you look back on that moment, you're like, maybe God made a mistake, because on this day, man, it is Ichabod. It is like the glory of God has just departed from our marriage. And we're just on the verge of giving up and dying on the whole thing. It could be with a son, a daughter. Like, man, when she was born, we took Hannah before the church and we were like so excited and we dedicated her before the Lord. And, we prayed over her every single night. But somewhere around 13, we could have changed Hannah's name to Ichabod, man. It was like the glory of God just vanished. It could be at work, a financial situation, the job you got at 22, you prayed for that job. At 28, you begged God for that opportunity. You got the job. 5 years later, 10 years later, going to the 15, man, it feels like you're pulling in the parking lot of Ichabod Enterprises every day. It's like the glory of God has just departed from your circumstances. I think every single one of us in this moment, or in this room, you've had a set of circumstances before where Ichabod, the glory of God is gone. And we don't know how to get it back. It gets worse for Israel. The Israelites have lost the very symbol of the glory of God, the presence of God. The Philistines have captured it. The Philistines, they're not quite sure what to do with it. They have the ark, more just to anger the Israelites. They take it back to Philistia, where they live, obviously. And you can see kind of here, this map is a bit outdated. Wouldn't work for you now. But you kind of see Judea, this is where Israel is. There's a massive valley that separates the two. On the other side of the valley, this is Philistia. They capture the ark of the covenant, the ark of the Lord. They take it with them back to Ashdod, which is their capital city, and they drag it into their temple, and they don't really know what to do with it. The temple priests put the ark of God in the temple of Dagon, their false god, and there's a massive statue of Dagon, this huge towering statue to their god Dagon, and the temple priests set the ark of God right there in front of Dagon. They walk in the very next day, Dagon's on his face before the ark of the Lord. And the temple priests, they don't quite know what happened. They think maybe an earthquake, maybe a tremor. So the temple priests hoist Dagon back up, which I love that. Which, just for free today, if you've ever had to pick your God up off the floor, you probably need a new God. If the thing that you worship, man, you've ever had to pick it up, like clean it, dust it off, I mean, that's a sign you need a new God right there. They walk in the very next day. Dagon's hands and feet are broken off, and he's on his face again before the ark of the Lord. The people of Philistia, the temple priests at Ashdod, get a clue, and they say, we got to get rid of this thing. So they call the temple priests in Gath. I'm abbreviating the story this morning. They call the temple priests at Gath. They say, hey, we got a gift coming your way. And so they send the ark of the Lord to Gath, which is the hometown of Goliath. That story is a few pages later in 1 Samuel. And now in Gath, they have the Ark of the Covenant. They don't know what to do with it either. But they start to notice in Gath, after a few months, a lot of people are dying. Apparently, the glory of God is serious business. And they all of a sudden begin to notice that plagues are breaking out in the city. Terrible things are happening. So they do what you or I would do. They call the people in Ekron. They say, hey, we got a gift coming your way. And they load up the Ark of the Covenant. Nobody really knows what to do with the glory of God in this moment. They load it up. They send it to Ekron. Same thing happens after 7 months. Plagues break out. People start dying in Ekron. The temple priests are like, man, they get a big fat clue. There's something about the Ark of the Covenant that contains the very presence of the one true God. And they say, we got to get rid of this thing. And so they call up Israel. I love that. They say, hey, we have the ark of your God. And Israel's like, I know, we're going to come get it back eventually. And the temple priests at Ekron say, no, you can come get it. We'll give it to you. And so they load it up on a cart. Some people from Beth Shemesh, they cross over the valley. They get to Ekron. They load it up on a cart. And the people of Israel, the people of Beth Shemesh, they're still wicked. The ark of the Lord is still not where it's supposed to be. It's still not in the city of God. In fact, some of us, you know the story. It's going to take David going and getting the ark of the Lord to finally bring it into the city of God, the very presence of God. But at this moment, they're just kind of transporting it, shuffling it from place to place. And the people of Beth Shemesh load it up. They take it back to Beth Shemesh. And there's a guy named Uzzah. It's another fun name. And it says that Uzzah is thinking, you know, Philistia's had this thing for a few years. We better peek inside, which breaks the rules of how to care for the Ark of the Covenant, to see if the Philistines took anything out of it. And it says when Uzzah opens it up, it says Uzzah falls over dead. And more people died that day in Beth Shemesh. Apparently, the glory of God is serious business. The very presence of God the activity of God, the glory of God. And it says the Israelites, they don't quite know what to do with this thing. The people in Beth Shemesh, I love this. This is, I know it doesn't sound uplifting, but it's so powerful. Verse 20 of 1 Samuel chapter 6, it says, and the people of Beth Shemesh asked, who can stand in the presence of the Lord? This holy God. So whom will the ark go up to from here? And Israel is starting to get a clue that their God is powerful. They're starting to get a clue of the wildness of their God. They're starting to get a clue that when their God speaks, you obey the word of God. They're starting to get a clue that there's something to who God is and the very nature of God. I think for a lot of us in this room, at some moment in life, if you were to tell your story, you clued into the glory of God, and that when God speaks a command over your life, you obey that command. And Israel's just going, we don't know what to do with the glory of God. They called everybody in Beth Shemesh, said, hey, do you have a spare bedroom? Nobody in Beth Shemesh would take the ark of the Lord. And it says, so they called this guy named Abinadab, another fun name. And they said, Abinadab, do you have a spare bedroom? And he said, I do. And the ark of the Lord goes to Abinadab's house. It's still in Israel, but it's still not in the place where God had commanded for it to be. And it stays at Abinadab's house until David's going to come pick it up. He's not even alive yet, but it's going to happen years later. And he's going to take it back to the city of Jerusalem where God ultimately wanted it to be. But it stays at Abinadab's house, and it says the whole time, there's this guy named Samuel. He remembers what happened at the field at Ebenezer. He knows the national story of this thing. It's been 20 years since the ark of God has been in the place of God where it's supposed to be. And now it's just sitting at Abinadab's house. And the whole time, Samuel seems to be clued into the fact that it's not the ark of the Lord that's the powerful thing. It's the presence of God, the very nature of God, the holiness of God that they all need to clue into. That it's not the ark that they should have their faith in. It's the presence of God that is the actual powerful force. And so he's still the one in a wicked land of Israel begging for God's activity, begging for God's presence. And it says that on a battlefield on a particular day, it's been 20 years since the ark was captured by the Philistines. They're facing the Philistines again. I mean, this is just how it goes. It's just constant in the book. The Philistines are breathing down their neck again, and it says Samuel is on the battlefield. And he's praying. I know the ark's not where it's supposed to be. I know the people's lives aren't in the way that they should be. But it says Samuel is sacrificing. Verse 10 of 1 Samuel 7. He's sacrificing the burnt offering. The Philistines drew near to engage in Israel in battle. Every time before, they knew how this was going to go. They were going to lose a lot of men. It was going to be bloody. It was going to repeat of what happened at Ebenezer. But that day, the Lord thundered with a loud thunder against the Philistines and drew them into such a panic that they were routed before the Israelites. The men of Israel rushed out of Mizpah and pursued the Philistines. So they're still going after them, carrying swords like, we're actually winning. This is unbelievable. Slaughtering them along the way to a point below Beth-kar. Verse 12, it says, then Samuel, while everybody else is carrying swords going after him all the way to Beth-kar, it says Samuel takes a stone and sets it up between Mizpah and Shen. And he names the stone what? Thus far, the Lord has helped us. He names the stone Ebenezer. Thus far, the Lord has helped us. Does it strike anybody else as odd? I mean, this is the best moment Israel's had as a nation. I mean, other than crossing the river and getting into the promised land, I mean, this is one of the moments you hang on the wall. You post this photo on Instagram. I mean, they just defeated the mighty Philistines. And the worst thing that's ever happened to them was the day that the ark of God was stolen. Bless you. And it says, in the best moment in Israel's history, he names it Ebenezer. To anybody who heard him say that, I mean, when he sets the stone down, he's like, Ebenezer, thus far the Lord has helped us. They would say, what'd you say? That's our national nightmare. That's the worst thing that's happened to us. What happened at Ebenezer, the day that Hophni and Phinehas dragged the ark into battle, we lost 4,000 men. This is the best thing that's happened. We don't want to think about the worst thing that happened. I mean, what in the world? I mean, that's like if you had a baby and I came to the hospital, I said, man, he's so adorable. What'd you name him? And you're like, this is Osama bin Laden Smith, you know? Like, what? Is that a family name? Where'd you get that? Like, you know what goes into naming something. I mean, some of us in this room as parents, I mean, when you thought about naming your first child or your second or third child, I mean, you put a lot of effort into that. Your husband's like, what about the name Sasha? You're like, no, we can't go with Sasha. I got put in a locker by a Sasha when I was 14. No way. I mean, you think a lot about a name, and yet he names it. It's not by accident. I think for Samuel, this isn't a stone as much as it is a story that has gone on for 20 years since the battle at Ebenezer. And he sees the connection that we often miss between the worst things that happen in our lives and the best things that happen in our lives. And for 20 years, this stone of Ebenezer is a story of God's faithfulness, that all the setbacks were actually set up for this particular moment on this particular day. It's not so much a stone, man. This is a story that they've lived through all the Ichabods. And they've made it to this particular moment, and they see, and he sees in this particular moment, there's this powerful connection. At the moment we thought the faithfulness of God had left, the moment we thought God's glory was gone, he was with us the entire time. And even on our worst possible day, God was using all of that, and he sees the connection between the best thing that happened to them and the worst thing that happened. This was a 20-year story. Thousands of men had died. And he says, Ebenezer. I'm always amazed when I meet people who seem to possess a superpower. You know what I'm talking about. It's maybe a friend of yours at work that they beat the sales record every year. It's maybe somebody you know in your family or friend who is an entrepreneur. They seem to possess unbelievable levels of courage. It could be a father or somebody that you know, and he's always fully present with his kids, and it's like he's a superhero. Maybe it's a mom, you know, and man, she can like make a whole Pinterest board in an hour. You're just like, that's phenomenal. Like, she's a superhero. I'm always amazed when I meet people who seem to possess a superpower, some unbelievable gift, and you ask them about it. Have you ever noticed they'll always tell you stories of all their setbacks? You ask them about the best thing that seems to be there in their life, and they tell you a series of stories of all the worst things that have happened in their life. And it's as if they recognize and see what Samuel saw that day, that all the setbacks were actually set ups for a comeback. And something God was going to do. And you and I often just see the best in somebody, and you often, have people ask you about the best things in your life, but you know that it's connected to the worst things that have happened to you in your life. And the best things, and we don't like to think about it in the moment when we're celebrating the best things that happen, but the best things that happen in our lives are always connected to the worst things that happen in our lives. And there's always a thread between the moment on the battlefield at Ebenezer to the moment of victory later on. And it's always connected. It's always part of the same story. And so Samuel says, Ebenezer, the best thing is connected to the worst. Several years ago, when our oldest son was born, Dane, January 9th, 2012, when he came out, we didn't know if he was going to be a boy or a girl, but if you would have asked Rosanna or me in that moment, we would have said, man, this is the best thing that's ever happened to us. Having this beautiful little baby. And he came out and we were like, man, this is so awesome. And within a few moments, we're like, this is the best thing that's ever happened to us. And we knew right away, we didn't know if he was a boy or a girl, but when he came out, we knew right away what his name was going to be when we realized he was a boy, and his name was Dane. And I remember the doctors in there, they're like, what's his name? I'm like, Dane. Did you say Dave? No, I said Dane. Did you say, Dean? No, I said Dane. Like, and the doctors look at me like Great Dane, like the dog. I'm like, thank you. Yeah, that's kind of what I meant. But we knew what his name was going to be. And the best thing that ever happened to us in that moment, because Rosanna's dad had died 9 years earlier of cancer, and he had the exact same name. And so every time we say his name, Dane, the best thing that's ever happened to us, for Rosanna, my wife especially, is connected to the worst thing that ever happened. But it's a reminder when you see his eyes who look like his grandfather's eyes, when you see his smile that looks a little bit like his grandfather's smile, it's a reminder that the worst things that happen in life are always connected to the best things that happen in life. And you can never break the thread between the two. But when we begin to see life with spiritual eyes, we begin to recognize all the setbacks are actually setups for a story. This isn't a stone, it's a story. The worst moments being turned into the best moments. I think for most of us in this room, life often feels like a series of moments that belong on the wall. It's the photos that you post, it's the diploma that you hang, it's the certificate that you got for whatever. It's the photo of the beach trip, 1998. It's that picture of you and your father. Life is often a series of things that we post online or belong on the wall. And then there's all this random stuff, isn't there? There's the times that you were betrayed. There's the moments that you sat at the bedside of a friend right before he died. There's a moment when your dad said the hurtful words that when he said it, man, 20 years have gone by, but you couldn't put the toothpaste back in the tube. There's all those moments of life that just feel random. And then we just want more moments to belong on the wall, but there's all these other moments that seem to be a lot of the moments of life, and they just feel random often. Why did that happen? Well, why did she have to act that? Why did all these things happen? And many of us, if you were to tell your story, it feels like, especially the older you get, you just keep accumulating these heavy burdens. And you go through life and there's all these burdens that you carry through life. Like, man, why do I have to carry this? And then somebody else piles on and then something else happens and you're just kind of going through life just wobbly, trying to hold it all. And at some moment, we realize what Samuel realized. The stones of grief and burdens and pain that we carry, the worst things, all the setbacks were actually setups for the things that God was doing the whole time. And we maybe never even get to see it. But all that pain, nothing is wasted in the economy of God. And Ebenezer is a stone to say, I see his faithfulness all the way connected back to the battlefield where we lost 4,000 men in the ark. The glory of God was actually present the entire time. If you were to ask Rosanna, my wife, losing her dad at 19, the worst thing that's ever happened to her. Far too young to die. But at the same time, if you were to ask Rosanna how God's used that, she would tell you that some of her best friends in life in this moment, in this day, are people, other girls, other women who've gone through the exact same thing. And somewhere along the way, they said the two most powerful words in the English language to each other, me too. And through the pain and through the heartache, and many of you in this room have stories just like this, that because of the worst moments in your life, it has forged friendships with some of the best friends that you have, deep friendships that you can never replace because of the things that you've gone through. And there's something about the best things that we have in our life are always connected to the worst things that we've experienced in life. There's a connection. There's always a thread between the best and the worst. Some of us maybe today, the stones that you carry, those heavy burdens that you're carrying through life, you're Ebenezer from way back when. It might be hard because it's a self-inflicted wound. You were the one that ended the marriage. You're the one that said the terrible thing. You're the one that had the addiction. You're the one that's still trying to battle through whatever it is. And you would say, man, the stones I carry it's just guilt. And your conscience, your heart is so weighed down, buried in guilt because of the things that you've done. But when you step into the presence of Jesus and you start bringing those stories of guilt and you start confessing them and you start finding yourself in conversation with people who've been through what you've been through, suffering the same self-inflicted wounds, all of a sudden you begin to realize the stories of guilt get transformed, don't they, into stories of grace. And all of a sudden, the greatest gift that you've ever received, the grace of God, is deeply connected to the worst things that you've ever done. And you understand the power of grace simply because of all the Ebenezers in your past and the terrible things and decisions and choices and self-inflicted wounds. And the stories of guilt in the presence of God become transformed into stories of grace. The best and the worst are always connected. This is especially true when you realize that for most people in this world that contribute something to this world, it's always connected to something in their past. It's always connected to the worst day of their life. Some of us in this room, you're going through a set of circumstances right now. It could be the loss of a loved one. It could be a health issue. It could be a marital conflict. It could be financial. It could be whatever, lost relationship with a son or daughter. And you have friends that reach out to you and they say, hey, I'm praying for you. I love you. They're texting you scripture and all that's fine and good. But who you really want to talk to in this moment is not those people. You want to talk to somebody who's been through what you're in the middle of, don't you? How many of us know exactly what I'm talking about? And it's because they're on the other side of the shore and they've actually lived through the Ebenezer that you're just walking off the battlefield of. And the worst thing that ever happened to them has now been transformed into some kind of a wisdom and some kind of a friendship that's saving your life in the middle of your crisis. And they're able to give that away. And God has somehow transformed the worst thing that ever happened to them into the best thing that's happened to you in this crisis. And some of us, your story is that you're giving yourself away to somebody because of what you've gone through, and you're somehow able to take the Ebenezers of your past, and you meet somebody in a support group, or you meet somebody in crisis, and you're able to say, man, Ebenezer. And you're the stone of help for them because of what you went through 20 years ago. Whenever I meet somebody who's contributing to some cause, or they're raising money for something, or they somehow managed to raise a lot of money or give their heart away to something with their alabaster jar, whatever it is, I'm always amazed 100 times out of 100, they're connected to that cause because somewhere along the way, their life got shattered by the thing that they're trying to heal. Well, why are you so passionate about that? Why are you raising money for that illness? Because my son got diagnosed with it. And something about the worst day of their life has been transformed into a stone of help that they're offering to other people. And you recognize this with people. You're like, how are they so generous? It's because somewhere along the way, the setbacks got turned into a setup. An Ebenezer wasn't just a stone for Samuel, it's a story of what God was doing. Maybe for you, you find yourself in an Ichabod today. You find yourself, it's like, man, the glory of God is gone. It could be in marriage, it could be in finances, it could be in a relationship. It's like, man, the glory of God is just gone. And what we beg for in these moments is a new set of circumstances. And I'll pray that prayer with you. I will hold your hand and weep with you in the moments when you're like, God, give me a new set of circumstances. But sometimes in those moments, in the Ichabod moments of life, what God actually wants to give you is a new set of eyes, of which you see those circumstances and realize all the setbacks are actually these setups for something God is going to do in the pain, as long as we stay on our knees and don't waste it. And we can actually begin to Ebenezer our way out of the Ichabod by saying, God, I see these setbacks as a setup. I don't know what you're going to do, but something about my best days are still ahead, even though I'm in the middle of my worst ones. And we see the thread that Samuel sees in this moment. The glory of God never departed. Samuel saw it before anybody. We're on the other side of the cross. We see what Paul said in Colossians 1, verse 27. I love this. He essentially says the glory of God is not in an abandoned field in Ekron. He says the glory of God, he says to them, verse 27 of Colossians 1, to them God has chosen to make known among the Gentiles the glorious riches of this mystery, which is Christ in you, the hope of what? The hope of glory is inside of you. This divine, wild God has taken up residence, not in a temple, but in people. Which means that all of your guilt stories can be transformed into grace stories. All things work together, the good, the bad, for the good of those that are called according to his purpose. All things, Paul says in Colossians 1:20, are being reconciled back to God. All moments of life, all the pain, all the trauma, all the things that you look back on, the national nightmare, the scene, the story, you go, I wish I could just forget that. That moment was laced with glory and could be transformed in the presence of God, not because of something you've done, but because of what Christ did on a cross, and his glory resides in you. All guilt stories can become grace stories, and the glory of God never departs. The hope of glory resides in the hearts of people today because of what Christ did, which means there's always hope for an Ebenezer in whatever story. Let's pray together. God, we thank you for your glory. We thank you that you have chosen to take up residence in people today. God, I know somebody within the sound of my voice, if they were to tell me their story, they would just say Ichabod. If they were to talk about their marriage right now, it's Ichabod. If they were to talk about their kids, man, it's Ichabod. And God, I just pray, give us the eyes Samuel had to see how the worst things are connected to the best. What is it you're doing? What's the setup in the setback? What's the comeback in the setback? What story are you writing? Because every Ebenezer, it's not just a stone today, God. It's a story. Glory is in the room. Glory is in the hearts and the minds of people, which means that any moment is redeemable. Any story is never too far gone. And we thank you for that today, God. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.